Hello students, so welcome back to your biology channel. So today we are discussing a very important and interesting chapter from the human anatomy and physiology. Okay, so this is the nervous system. Okay, now nervous system का basic हम सबको पता है, that is it deals with the brain and the nerves and the spinal cords. But उसके details के बारे में हम इस chapter में पढ़ेंगे. ठीक है? तो सबसे पहले जान लेते हैं कि why do we even need the nervous system, right? Now, nervous system ज़रूरत इसीलिए होता है for remembering, for thinking, for reasoning, for regulation of the voluntary and involuntary movements of the body, right? So, अगर हमारे पास ब्रेन नहीं होता तो हम सोचते कैसे, राइट? तो फिर अगर सोचते नहीं तो खाना कैसे खाते या फिर पढ़ाई कैसे करते, सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट, राइट? So, without the nervous system, we basically cannot do anything. And since जब से हम छोटे से तब से पढ़ते आ रहे, दैट इज द ब्रेन इज द CPU of our body, right? That is, brain controls all the functions and activities of our body, like all the organs. तो अगर ब्रेन नहीं होता, दैट इज अगर नर्वस सिस्टम नहीं होता, तो हमारा हार्ट भी नहीं चलता, कुछ भी नहीं होता, राइट? We wouldn't have existed if the nervous system wasn't there. So it is a very important. So the basic of nervous system starts with the neurons. Now, what are neurons? Neurons are the smallest cell or the simplest unit of the nervous system. It is just a single cell. Now, neuron का structure normal वो जो animal cell होता है उससे थोड़ा सा अलग होता है. So, let us discuss first about the structure of the neuron. Now, the structure of the neuron first consists of three main parts: the cell body, the dendrites, and the axon. Now, the cell body here is the main center which contains the cytoplasm, which is also granular, and it also contains a nucleus. Now, the cell body, which is also known as the cyton, does not contain any centrosome. Now, centrosome हम सबको पता है that centrosome is the basis of cell division, right? तो अगर centrosome ही नहीं होगा तो क्या cell division हो सकता है सेल में? नहीं हो सकता ना. तो इसका मतलब क्या होता है? That a nerve cell is only created once. That is, it cannot divide from itself. तो इसका मतलब the nerve cell अगर एक बार डैमेज हो जाए, it cannot regrow. So अगर किसी पेशेंट का नर्व डैमेज होता है तो वो कभी भी ठीक नहीं होगा, which is very threatening, right? Okay. Now फिर से न्यूरॉन के स्ट्रक्चर पे आते हैं. Now, the neuron has the cell body which contains the the cytoplasm. Next, it has some branches, that is the extensions of this cyton, which are known as the dendrites. And we have the axons. Axons are much more stretched than the dendrites, right? Now, axon ends are also formed into bulbs, right? Bulb-like structures. Now, axon is covered by a white layer known as the myelin sheath. What is it called? The myelin sheath. And the outermost covering of these myelin sheath is known as the neurolemma. What is it called? Neurolemma. These myelin sheath of the neurolemma contains a nucleus. Okay. Now, the cell body also, I forgot to tell you one thing, is that the cell body contains granules, and that granules are known as the Mrs. granules. Okay. Now, the axon ends are irregularly covered with myelin sheath. That is, there are some gaps present between the myelin sheath cover, right? Now, these gaps are known as the nodes of Ranvier. Not Ranvier, it's nodes of Ranvier. Okay. Next, the axon terminal either ends in the muscles or the body tissues, or it ends in the synapses or the synaptic clefts. Now, synapse थोड़ी देर बाद हम डिस्कस करते हैं. Now, what is synaptic cleft? Now, synaptic cleft is nothing but the gap present in between the axon terminal, which is here, axon terminal of one neuron, and the beginning of dendrites of another neuron. Okay, so that gap is known as synaptic cleft. Now मैं यहाँ पे ड्रॉ करके दिखाती हूँ ऐसे। सपोज यहाँ से एक और न्यूरॉन स्टार्ट हो रहा है, तो दिस गैप इज नोन एज द synaptic cleft. Okay, good. Next, we will move on with the transmission of nerve impulses through the neurons. Now, how does it occur? Let's see. तो सबसे पहले two things we have to know, that is the polarized state and the depolarized state. Now, what is polarized state? देखो, suppose this structure is a axon, ठीक है? तो ये axon का outer membrane हुआ, ये वाला part, and this one is the axon's inner membrane, right? So the inner membrane of the axons actually contains negative charges, okay, and the outside of the axonal membrane contains the positive charges. Now, why are these positive charges? Now, these positive charges are due to the presence of Na plus ions. Okay. Now, ये नॉर्मल कंडीशन होता है, दैट इज द रेस्टिंग स्टेज ऑफ द, दैट इज इस वक्त कोई भी इम्पल्स पास नहीं हो रहा है, तो दिस रेस्टिंग फेज इज नोन एज द पोलराइज्ड स्टेट where the outer membrane has the positive charge and the inner membrane has the negative charge, right? Good. Next, on stimulus, that is stimulus is any external change of the body of the organism, right? तो जैसे कि हम अगर टच करें तो उसका रिस्पॉन्स क्या आएगा? Okay. So where the place where we are touching, that becomes the stimulus for the axon, right? Now on stimulus, what happens is that these axonal membrane become permeable to the sodium ions, right? So due to the permeability of the Na plus ions of the axonal membrane, the Na plus ion rushes inside the axonal membrane. Due to that, the on that particular part, the inner part of the axonal membrane becomes positive while the outer part becomes negative, and that condition is known as the condition of depolarization, right? Now, due to this depolarization, a nerve impulse is starting to move on, right? Now, due to this continuous polarization and depolarization, the impulse are conducted, right? Now, how does that occur? तो देखो, यहाँ पे जब depolarization हो रहा है, तो इस part का depolarization is working as the stimulus for the next part, and due to that, जो नेक्स्ट वाला पार्ट है फिर से वहाँ पे सोडियम प्लस आयन एंटर करेगा और वो वाला पार्ट भी डीपोलराइज्ड हो जाएगा, जबकि जो प्रीवियस पार्ट था वो फिर से पोलराइज्ड हो जाएगा, दैट इज अंदर नेगेटिव हो जाएगा और बाहर पॉजिटिव, whereas वो नया वाला पोजीशन में बाहर नेगेटिव हो जाएगा और अंदर पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा, ठीक है? तो वन depolarization acts as the stimulus for the next part, right? तो इसी तरीके से a series of depolarization and polarization nerve impulses को conduct करता है, ठीक है? तो इसी तरीके से हमारा nerve impulse conduct होता है. And how is that sodium, that ions entering that axonal membrane? That is by the action of ATP, right? तो इसी चीज को हम सोडियम पंप कहते हैं. So what is sodium pump? That is the entering of the Na plus ions inside the axonal membrane in order to make it depolarized. Okay, completely clear? I hope कोई confusion नहीं है, ठीक है? अगर कोई confusion होगा तो एक बार फिर से आप ये वीडियो देखिएगा, ये वाला पार्ट, तो आपको सब कुछ समझ में आ जाएगा, ठीक है? Synapse is the point of contact between one axon terminal with the dendrite of another neuron, which is separated by a gap, and that gap is only that synaptic cleft. तो जो वो synaptic cleft को लेके जो वो बीच का एरिया होता है, that is the point of contact between a axon terminal and the dendrite of another neuron, is known as the synapse. Next, we will move on to the types of neurons. Now, what are the types of neurons? Those are the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and the association neurons. Okay. Now, what is the work of the sensory neuron? Now, sensory neurons are the neurons which carries the impulses from the receptor to the brain or the spinal cord. Now, what is the receptor? Receptor is a place where we receive the stimulus. Simple. Okay. Now, what is the work of the motor neuron? Now, the motor neuron, it carries the impulses from the brain and the spinal cord towards the effector. Okay. Now, what is the effector? Effector is the place which will react in return of the stimulus. Right. Now, what is the work of an association neuron? An association neuron is present which is held in the connection of the sensory and the motor neurons. Okay. Good. Next comes the nerves. Now, what are nerves? The nerves are the bundles of neurons. Okay. तो अब सबको neurons और nerves का difference पता चल गया. So, neurons are the simplest cell of the nervous system, and the accumulation of many neurons or the bundle of neurons is known as the nerves. Okay. Now, nerves are of also three types. Those are the sensory, the motor, and the mixed. Okay. Now, what is the job of the sensory nerve? Obviously, it conducts impulses from the receptor to the brain or the spinal cord. Motor nerve, it conducts impulses from the brain to the brain or the spinal cord to the effector, right? And what is the work of the mixed nerve? The mixed nerve is made up of both sensory and motor neuron. Okay, good. Now you can also say that this is the associative nerve. Next comes the ganglia. Now what is ganglia? Ganglia is the aggregate of nerve cells. Okay, जो थोड़ा सा bunch form कर जाता है या फिर clog form कर जाता है कभी कभी nerve cells. So that places are known as the ganglia. Okay. Now एक चीज जान के रखो, काम आएगा बाद में. Now जो हम सुनते हैं ना, जो योगा में energy levels होता है, right? Now that energy levels are nothing but this ganglia only. Okay. This is just a small fact. I thought it would be helpful. Okay. Next comes the division of nervous system. Okay. The nervous system दोनों parts में divided. What are those? Those are the CNS or the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. It consists of the nerve center in the brain and the spinal cord. Okay. Now this PNS or the peripheral nervous system is further divided into two parts, which are the SNS or the somatic nervous system and the ANS or the autonomic nervous system. Now SNS or the somatic nervous system consists of the nerves which controls the voluntary functions of the body. Voluntary functions means the movements, right? Now, autonomic nervous system का काम क्या है? It consists of the ganglia and the nerves which controls the involuntary functions of the body. That is the activities of the internal organs which cannot be controlled by us. Okay. Now, let us come to the structure of the brain. Now, first of all, the brain is protected by our skeletal system, that is our skull, which is made up of bones, and that part is known as the cranium. That is the brain box of the skull, or the cavity of the skull which contains the brain is known as the cranium. Then the brain is also further protected by some coverings known as the meninges. Now these meninges are of three layers. Okay, one the dura mater, second the arachnoid, third the pia mater. Okay, the dura mater is the fibrous outermost layer. Arachnoid is the middle layer, which acts as a cushion-like web-like structure, and the pia mater is which is the innermost meninges, is highly vascular. What does that mean? It means उसके पास बहुत blood supply होता है. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट ये टर्म हमने बहुत बार सुना है कि मेनिंजाइटिस, कि उसको मेनिंजाइटिस हुआ है. तो व्हाट इज दिस मेनिंजाइटिस? Meningitis is nothing but simply the inflammation of these meninges. It can be the dura mater or the arachnoid, whatever. तो अगर meninges का inflammation होता है तो we call it meningitis. Next comes another thing is that the cerebrospinal fluid. So what is cerebrospinal fluid? Cerebrospinal fluid is an extra covering, that is, it is a fluid present in between the gap of the cranium and the meninges. Okay, तो cranium और meninges के बीच में जो fluid होता है, जो brain को extra protection देता है, उसे ही हम cerebrospinal fluid कहते हैं. Okay, I hope it's clear. Now we will move on with the parts of the brain or the structure. Okay, so now let us move on with the parts of brain. Now the brain is divided into three parts. Those are the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata. Okay. Now the cerebrum, which is this part, okay, the highly convoluted part. Now cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. As you can clearly see here, that is, ये यहाँ से start होता है, यहाँ पे खत्म होता है, ठीक है? जो ऊपर का पूरा लेयर cerebrum लेता है, तो obviously cerebrum is the largest part. Now this cerebrum is divided into cerebral hemisphere. Okay, that is two parts. Now the left part is always the left hemisphere and the right part is the right hemisphere. Next, the cerebrum, the outer part of the cerebrum is known as the cerebral cortex, and the inner part of the cerebrum is known as the cerebral medulla. Now, the cerebral cortex is covered by the cell body and the dendrites of the neurons, and it appears to gray in color, right? So, it is also known as the gray matter. That is, the outer cortex of the cerebrum is covered by the gray matter, while the inner medulla is covered by the white matter. Now, what is white matter? White matter obviously consists of the rest of the neurons, which is actually the axon part, okay, the fibril part of the neuron. Okay, good. Next, the cerebrum is highly convoluted, right? That is, ये जो यहाँ पे curves देख रहे हो, जो folds देख रहे हो, इसे हम convolutions कहते हैं. Now, the fold part, which is the upper parts, these are known as the gyri, and the depressed part, which are the pit formed area, this area is known as the sulci. So, the cerebrum is fully covered with the gyri and the sulci. Next, the left and the right hemisphere of the cerebrum is divided by a large or a thick band of fibers, which is known as the corpus callosum. ठीक है, ये corpus callosum बोर्ड्स के लिए बहुत important है, MCQ में या फिर fill in the blanks या फिर name the following कहीं भी आ सकता है, ठीक है. Next, what is the function of the cerebrum? The function of the cerebrum is that the controls the voluntary functions of the body. Now, what are the voluntary functions? The functions that we can control by ourselves, by our willpower. Okay, so it is actually the seat of willpower. So ये cerebrum ही हमारा subconscious and conscious mind control करता है, ठीक है. हम जो कर रहे हैं, हम किसी से बात कर रहे हैं, जो हमारा thought process है या फिर हमारा जो intelligence है, it is controlled by the cerebrum only. Okay. Now, the cerebrum is divided into four regions. Okay, cerebrum is divided into four regions, or we can call it the lobes. Okay. Now, what are these four lobes? It is the temporal lobe, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Temporal lobe का लोकेशन कुछ यहाँ पे होता है. Frontal lobe का लोकेशन ये ऊपर का सामने वाला साइड होता है. पैरिएटल लोब यहाँ पे होता है और ऑक्सीपिटल लोब यहाँ पे होता है, ठीक है. दिस इज द लास्ट पार्ट ऑफ द सेरेब्रम. ओके, नाउ इसके डिटेल्स के बारे में हम हायर क्लासेस में पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है. अभी के लिए ये फोर लोब्स तुम बस उसका नाम जान के रखो, ठीक है. गुड. नेक्स्ट कम्स द सेरेब्रम. ओके, नाउ व्हाट इज द फंक्शन ऑफ द सेरेब्रम? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सेरेब्रम का पोजीशन देख लो यहाँ पे. ओके, दैट इज बिलो द सेरेब्रम. The cerebellum is consist of numerous furrows. ठीक है, यहाँ पे तुम देखो कि ये जो यहाँ पे डिप्रेशंस जो पड़ता है, it is formed of numerous furrows, as you can see here. Okay. Now, what is the function of the cerebellum? Cerebellum का function होता है it maintains the body balance. Okay. और and the muscular activity, that is हम जो ऐसे खड़े हैं, हम जो चल रहे हैं या फिर हम हमारा हाथ हिला रहे हैं, पैर हिला रहे हैं, तो वो कौन कंट्रोल करता है? सेरिबेलम कंट्रोल करता है. ठीक है. तो सेरिब्रम की तरह सेरिबेलम का भी वो बाहर वाला ग्रे पार्ट होता है और इनसाइड में व्हाइट मैटर होता है. ठीक है. थर्ड comes the medulla oblongata. Now don't confuse this inner medullars with this medulla oblongata. ये तो सिर्फ inner layer जो होता है उसे medulla कहते हैं. ठीक है. पर the structure or the third part of the brain is known as the medulla oblongata. Don't confuse and don't write only medulla. ठीक है. अगर तुम सिर्फ medulla लिखोगे तो कोई भी कंफ्यूज हो जाएगा इसके साथ, तो तुम्हारा आंसर कट जाएगा. ठीक है. तो ऑलवेज राइट medulla oblongata. Now medulla oblongata का पोजीशन कुछ यहाँ होता है. ठीक है. दैट इज बिलो द cerebellum and these medulla oblongata continues to the spinal cord. ठीक है. ये medulla oblongata जहाँ पे खत्म होता है वहाँ से spinal cord शुरू हो जाता है. ठीक है. Now what is the function of the medulla oblongata? The medulla oblongata का function होता है that is it controls the internal organs. ठीक है. जो हमारा हार्ट मसल्स है या फिर हमारा लंग्स है, ये सब मेडुला ऑब्लोंगेटा कंट्रोल करता है. तो हम जैसे ब्रीथ कर रहे हैं, जो हमारा हार्ट मूव कर रहा है, हमारा स्टमक जो अच्छे से डाइजेशन कर रहा है, तो उसके पीछे किसका हाथ है? मेडुला ऑब्लोंगेटा. तो तुम समझ रहे हो ना कि मेडुला ऑब्लोंगेटा इज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन. ऑल्दो सेरिब्रम इज द लार्जेस्ट पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन, बट मेडुला ऑब्लोंगेटा के बिना कोई भी इंटरनल ऑर्गन काम नहीं करेगा. राइट. तो अगर कभी भी इस मेडुला पार्ट में डैमेज होता है तो ऑब्वियसली इट विल लीड टू इंटरनल ऑर्गन फेलियर. हार्ट पे भी इफेक्ट कर सकता है, तो विच विल अल्टीमेटली लीड टू डेथ. ओके. अगर सेरिब्रम में कुछ डैमेज होता है तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या होगा कि हम भूलने लगेंगे, डिमेंशिया होगा, या फिर कभी कभी कोमा में भी जा सकते हैं. लेकिन हम it will not lead to death, but any damage to medulla oblongata will completely lead to death. Okay. क्योंकि यहाँ पे internal organ का failure हो जाएगा. ठीक है. Now we will discuss about the different regions of the brain. यहाँ पे तो हम parts of the brain पढ़ चुके हैं ना, तो अब हम location wise region brain का region पढ़ेंगे. ठीक है.